Hey, scholars. All right. We left off with them getting on the coach ride to Sacramento. And I don't know if you all remember, but you probably do, because it wasn't that long ago when we went ahead and went to the San Juan Bautista mission and we went and checked out all the coaches. And then there was all those rules for how to behave on a coach, and some of them were pretty funny. And yeah, so you have a frame of reference there, right? So that's the kind of coach that one of those coaches are the type of coaches that they took to go to Sacramento for the gold rush and the mining, to go to the mining camps. And we ended with Mr. Cut Eye Higgins being the man in the hippie hoppa hat. And I have a little bit of a frame of reference for that type of hat because Mr. Nazarov and I are travel enthusiasts, and we went ahead and went to Ecuador and to the equator, and that was a pretty cool and interesting trip. And they have the Ecuadorian hat. So basically, they're kind of like, I wish I had one here. I bought one for my father, but I do not have one in the house. But it is a wide-brimmed, kind of tightly woven type straw hat. And a hippie hoppa hat is the same. It's just from Panama. So Panama has the big hats, but Ecuadorian has their own, or Ecuador has their own Ecuadorian style hats. So that's why he didn't know that it was Cut Eye Higgins, right? Because the hat was lowered on his face, and then as he opens it, or lifts it up, rather, you realize that it's Cut Eye Higgins. Okay, so now let's see what happens. There. All right. Chapter 10. The Rogue Outrogued. Praiseworthy remained remarkably calm. He didn't so much raise an eyebrow, but he did give Jack a faint poke in the ribs with his elbow, as if to say, "Easy, Master Jack, easy. Leave the scoundrel to me." "Small world, ain't it?" grinned Cut-Eye Higgins. His hand remained at rest, in silent warning, on the butt of his pistol. "I hadn't noticed it until today," said Praiseworthy. "If I hadn't known better, I'd think you were still in Rio." The villain's scarred eye was set at squint. "Rio was too hot for me, you might say, so I lit out for Panama. Cross the isthmus, I'm going to have to look up that word, by bongo boat and muleback. A whole parade of folks is getting to the Pacific that way, and it looks like I beat you to California at that. I dare say you had a good map to guide you." The man in the hippie hoppa hat bared down his yellow teeth in a laugh. "A map? A map? Why, what map is that?" Praiseworthy narrowed his glance. "I bring you regards from the good Dr. Buckby." "Well now, ain't that very neighborly of you?" The stage charged across the valley flats, and the Frenchmen shook handkerchiefs in front of their noses to keep the dust away. Jonas T. Fletcher kept shooting tobacco juice out of the window, as if the ground were on fire. Jack's hand held to the horn spoon in his belt. He almost imagined it was a 4-shooter. That would make Mr. Cut-Eye Higgins sit up and take notice. Why, he begged to hand over Dr. Buckby's gold map. The dueling pistol in his belt would be no match for a 4-shooter. But Praiseworthy didn't seem in the least concerned about the lack of firearms. "Have you met Mr. Fletcher?" he said, tugging at his glove sleeve. "He tells us he's an undertaker. A man of your line of work, sir, never knows when he'll need the services of a good undertaker." "I didn't get the name," said the Missourian. "Higgins," Cut-Eye grinned. Doc Higgins, dentist. Well now, smiled the undertaker, the boys will be glad to have a tooth extractor in camp. Praiseworthy winked at Jack. The impostor had apparently given up his judgeship. A dentist, was he, specializing in extracting gold teeth, no doubt. And now, if you gentlemen will excuse me, said the butler, I believe I'll catch a nap. Sleep, Jack thought. How can anyone sleep with Mr. Cut-Eye Higgins sitting there? But before the stage had traveled another quarter of a mile, Praiseworthy was napping loudly. Jack sat gazing at the villain, their knees almost touching, and the man in the hippie-hoppa hat gazed back at him. By late afternoon, they had reached the Brown Foot Hills, and the stage pulled up at a relay station for a change of horses. With the mountains rising at their shoulders, Praiseworthy and Jack stood at the well, refreshing themselves with dippers of cool water. The 4-horse team was replaced with a team of 6 for the hard climb ahead. Do you think he's got Dr. Buckbee's map with him? Jack whispered. No doubt about it, said Praiseworthy. I'll wager he doesn't take his hand off the dueling pistol, even when he sleeps. Well, we'll need a shotgun to get the map away from him, a 4-shooter at least. Lacking one and the other, said Butler, we'll have to rely on our wits, Master Jack. I have no intention of allowing Dr. Buckbee to be cheated of his map. Soon they were underway again. The narrow road climbed sharply. Oak trees gave way to darkened pines. The sun was settling across the valley as if to desert them, and the driver's whip cracked in the air like rifle shots. Inside the wooden coach, all passengers sat knee to knee as before and held on against the bumps and the ruts of the road. Finally, the stage rounded a bend, and the trail seemed to shoot up like a ladder. Everybody out, shouted the driver. Push, gents, push! Cut-Eye Higgins didn't take his hand off the pistol butt for a moment. He pushed with one hand. Slowly, the stagecoach, piled high on top with luggage and supplies, climbed the road. The driver urged the team on with his whip. Keep at it, gents! We're gaining. Jack put his shoulder to the coach, like the others, and dug his shoes in the dirt. Halfway up the hill, it seemed to him the driver must have 6 whips in his hands for all the noise he was making. Suddenly, a window shattered and then another, and just as suddenly Jack became aware that it was only the crack of the whip in the air. That it wasn't only the crack of the whip in the air. Gunshots. Road, gents, the driver yelled. They set the brake and reached for his rifle. Hold up! Praiseworthy pushed Jack under the coach. Jonas T. Fletcher had beat him there. Through the spokes of the big wheels, Jack saw a dozen horsemen with red bandanas around their faces charge out of the pines. Cut-Eye Higgins drew his dueling pistol and fired. He missed. He didn't have a chance to reload. The road gents had surrounded, their guns and rifles bristling in the twilight. The leader of the big fellow with holes in his boots. The leader, a big fellow with holes in his boots, called to the driver, "Throw down your rifle. The rest of you reach for the sky, or I'll send you out there pronto." Jack swallowed hard and came out in the open. Praiseworthy gave him a reassuring glance and didn't seem scared at all. They raised their hands. Cut-Eyed Higgins growled to himself, but his arms shot up like others. "Sorry to interrupt your journey," said the leader. "We'll only detain you a moment. Boys, hop to it." 2 of the outlaws climbed on top of the stage and threw down trunks and boxes and carpet bags. Others broke them open to paw through for contents for valuables. Meanwhile, Another pair of road agents made quick work of the passengers. They pulled watches and chains off vests and tugged buckskin pouches of gold dust and pockets and belts. Jack tried not to look up at Praiseworthy's white gloves. The outlaws would never think of looking there, would they? "All right, gents," said one of the gang, threw the bandana across his mouth. "Now lower your hands one by one, and let's have your rings." He started with the Frenchman, and then came to Cut-Eye Higgins. He wore a gold ring with a ruby like a drop of blood. "Stolen, no doubt," thought Jack. "The rogue is being outrogued." But it was a small comfort. "Why, I wore this ring since I was a lad," said Cut-Eye Higgins. "It won't come off." "In that case," the outlaw laughed, "we'll have to chop off your finger." Cut-Eye Higgins removed the ring in an instant, and the highwayman roared. "I don't have a ring," said Jack. "I could see that, boy." The road agent moved on to Praiseworthy. "Well, look here, we've got a regular gentleman with gloves on." "Not a gentleman," corrected Praiseworthy. "Merely a butler." "What's that? Never heard of a butler." Jack's heart began to beat faster. Praiseworthy pulled off his right hand. Their gold dust, their grub stake, would soon be exposed. But Praiseworthy seemed unconcerned as can be. "How about the other hand?" growled the outlaw. "Naturally," said Praiseworthy. He pulled the glove off each finger, carefully but casually, as he held up his bare hand. The gold dust remained in the fingers of the glove. "No rings, as you see." And the outlaw moved on. Praiseworthy gave Jack a wink, without winking, and very calmly pulled the gloves on again. But another big fellow was emptying Praiseworthy's carpet bag in the dirt. Shirt cuffs, hairbrush. "Why, look here," the ruffian chuckled. "A picture. A regular beauty, ain't she?" Jack recognized the tiny type at once. It was his Aunt Arabella. He didn't know Praiseworthy had her picture along. When he glanced up, Praiseworthy had gone white with anger. "I'll thank you to return that picture to my bag," he warned, stamping each word out of cold steel. "You don't say. While I'm proud to own a picture like this, I'll be proud to own a picture like this. I guess I'll just take it along." The rest happened so fast, and Jack missed half of it in a blink of an eye. Praiseworthy, in his fury, struck like a bolt of lightning, grabbing the ruffian to his feet by his shirt front. He slammed his left glove fist into the man's bandana-covered face. The outlaw hurled back as if he had been struck with a stick of cordwood, and he just lay there. "Why, look at that," said the undertaker in awe. "Knocked that big fella 15 feet uphill." If his fellow outlaws had held their fire, it was only because they were too startled by the butler's awesome left jab. They were like trees growing from the ground they stood on, and then their leader seemed to grin behind his bandana. "I'll take my hat off to ya," he said. "But it ain't fittin' for a man in my line of work. That was something to see. Boys, lift our fallen friend across his saddle, and we'll be going." Jack gazed at Praiseworthy with fresh admiration. The butler had never let on that he was so handy with his fists. The truth of the matter was that Praiseworthy had been as surprised as the others to see the brute go flying. And then he remembered the heavy gold dust packed in his fingertips of the glove. It was exactly as heavy as lead. With his fingers clenched around it, in his fist, he had the kick of a mule. He picked up Aunt Arabella's picture and dusted it off. It seemed curious to Jack that he had brought it along. It made him feel strangely closer to Praiseworthy than ever before. "One more thing," said the gang leader. "All you gents, take off your coats and drop 'em in a pile." The guns came up, and that left no room for argument. Jonas T. Fletcher peeled off his frock coat. Cut-Eye Higgins dropped his dusty linen coat. Regretfully, Praiseworthy added his fine black coat to the pile. He would miss it. Never met an immigrant yet, said the leader, who didn't have gold pieces sewn up in the lining of his coat. You won't need coats in this heat, gents, so we'll just take 'em along. An instant later, the highwaymen spurred their horses and carried away their booty of watches, rings, buckskin, and gold pouches and coats. Praiseworthy, unaccustomed to the mere shirt sleeves, stood in the dust like a leopard suddenly deprived of his spots. Wait till the boys hear about this, said the undertaker. 15 feet uphill. Praiseworthy moved past him to step in front of Cut-Eye Higgins. I'll thank you, sir, to hand over Dr. Buckby's map. The dispirited villain reached for his dueling pistol, and Jack stopped in his tracks. Was Praiseworthy trying to get himself killed? Don't bother to draw your gun, said the butler. I was careful to notice that you never reloaded it. The map, sir, the map. The other man stared at him out of his scarred eye and then began to chuckle. But to Jack it sounded as much like a growl as a chuckle. You're a little late, said Cut-Eye Higgins. Late? The map was sewn up in the lining of my coat. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, it's getting juicier and juicier. Highwaymen, right? They're kind of like, when you hear of people kind of, what is that called? Michael, what is that called? I'm still on camera. What is that called when someone steals stuff? Oh, like a carjacker. Like carjacker, right? Like carjacking. So the highwaymen were like, they, instead of like stealing from cars, they would steal from the coaches, right? All the people in the coach, because they would know that they were coming in at the beginning of the gold rush with maybe money to spare, or maybe they had gone to town to get married and then they had gold with them, so they were easy prey for them. So, and now Dr. Buckby's map is with the highwaymen, with these criminals. So I'll be interested to see what happens in chapter 11. All right, I hope you're enjoying this. I got a new desk. Miss Hemingway, I don't know if you all know her, the kindergarten teacher, brought me a new desk, dropped it off outside. We maintained social distancing, but I'm going to be using this for all of the remote learning that I'll be doing with you guys and distance teaching. And I have a little sign right here that says momentum, and that is my positive word for the year. And I think right now, more than anything, it's a really good word because it's so easy during this time for everything to feel a little overwhelming, right? And a little scary. And then the days aren't that structured. And so it's really easy to kind of not get much done. And then that kind of like weighs on your heart, at least for me. And so I'm putting this at my remote teaching desk to just remind myself to keep moving, to keep working towards goals, whether it's finishing a book in a certain time or doing projects in my house or any kind of things that I've been working on. Keep that momentum going. All right, guys. Hope you're enjoying this book. I will see you for chapter 11. Bye.